First of all, I think I need to do this because these pieces of shit from Enforcer News. Hopefully, you get it on the screen here. My father worked on this. My father worked at top secret places. Alright? This piece of shit from the Enforcer News, Matt, and these other guys, these other dirty rats, piece of shit called me a liar about my father. He worked on the F-117. He's worked at other installations, secret installations and stuff. Secret where he got cancer from working on chemicals. A lot of stuff he couldn't talk about. He worked on SDI stuff as well. And I swear to fucking God, if I could get to a ring with this guy in some way, I'd probably beat the hell out of him because of him lying about me. Saying, I don't believe you. You don't sound right. You sound like you're lying and stuff like that. My father went from Plat 42 and went to these different bases. I know people that worked at Area 51 from Plat 42. And a lot of us that had fathers that worked from these secret locations, secret bases, alright? We would talk about a lot of top secret stuff, a lot of classified stuff, stuff that could get us into trouble, right? And so I got this dirty rat, Matt the Enforcer. You know, I mean, they put out some good stuff about Iran. And then they say, oh, UFOs, all this stuff like that, that's just, you know, fake and not real and stuff like that. I said, yo, you gotta be really retarded if you don't believe in UFOs and stuff like that. I see them a lot. Okay? I've been around this stuff. I've been around the paranormal. I know people that have worked on this stuff and everything. And, you know, at these installations as well. So, I mean, I have 40 years on me, on UFO stuff that I've been through. Let me see, I need to get a, kick as well. Got that. If I need to... But, it's really pissed me off that people would lie and say, oh, your story doesn't add up about my father. He would never talk to you about F-117, him, you know, work on the F-117 or classified stuff. Let me tell you something about my father. He got screwed over. And a lot of other guys got screwed over working at secret installations. They got cancer working on, you know, top secret stuff or hazardous waste. And so when you've been abused by our shitty government, saying that the stuff that is kept secret about UFOs and other classified programs, and they say it's about national security, that's the biggest bullshit. Again, here, let's see if I can get this on the screen here. If I can. Alright. If it's one thing I don't like, I don't tolerate, is somebody, some dumbass, calling me a liar. and say I don't know what I'm talking about. I do make mistakes sometimes. I'm not always right. I gotta say I do let my ego get the best of me sometimes because I have a lot of experience in UFOs and my own experiences, right? And let me see here. I need to check on that. Okay. But I got that. I'm gonna put that down here. I also just want to get, the kit going as well. I'd have to check on that. Hold on. Let's see here. Hold on, everybody. I'm just really pissed. Because I've had these dirty rats. I used to be attacked when I was a kid about UFOs, say demons, also BS. And it's not real. And I've always been right. I always knew what I was talking about. And everything. And, so when you've been abused by people that, and people talk shit about you and everything, say that, oh, your story doesn't add up and all this other stuff, I'm going to attack, I'm going to lash out and everything, and I'm going to be very pissed off about it. I'm not going to tolerate it. And I have so many experiences with UFOs since I was a kid. And I think it has to do with my father and other people, I don't know, being around some secret stuff and everything. But I got the proof right there. My father on there. And this retard just says, oh, I don't believe your story, your father working there. IFO said to you, so either, it's like, what the fuck do you know? I said, what the fuck? You don't know. And he's asking me, what's your dad's name? Which is totally against terms of service. Asking for real names. And this guy thinks he's holier than thou. I was taught by my father never to talk about classified stuff. Never to talk about it. And my father told me, never talk about what you've been through. Never talk about UFOs. He said, don't bring up the stuff that I talked to you about. Alright. He's dead. So now my gloves can come off. I'm going to talk. I just say a lot of stuff about our criminals that are running our government. Keeping UFOs and all this stuff is secret. In the name of national security, which it isn't. And people are dying because it's material, different stuff that these contractors use, defense contractors use, is causing cancer. People are dying. So, Enforcer Matt, before you talk, you should listen more. And you say that UFOs and stuff like this is all just, BS and everything. And that's all just, hocus pocus stuff. You're not as intelligent, as smart as you think you are. You need to be more open. Now let's move. I'm pissed. I just like shaking pissed. Anyways, let's get on it. Jesus Christ. Pissed. Have to check some of these. News here. Shout out to News Nation. I'd have to check some of this messages offline. Just to let everyone know. Tell me what you think, leave a like. I'm doing this stuff because of my own experiences with UFOs and the paranormal stuff. Let's keep going.
Friend of mine, the irrepressible Melinda Leslie, who runs what is probably one of the most intriguing tours in America, the Sedona UFO tours. For years, she's been using high-tech Generation 3 military night vision goggles to view the night sky near Sedona in Arizona. The counterculture town is a known UFO hotspot, well known for frequent UAP sightings.
One thing is, I've talked about this before. This has been well known to get with the Indian tribes, tribal nations, stuff like that. I've known about ETs, UFOs, time displacement, time differentiation, time changes, cryptids, Bigfoots, stuff like that in these areas and stuff. So hopefully people can hear me. I hope. Please. All right. This has been going on there forever. It seems like there are nexus lines, lane lines, portals in some of these areas. This happens around the world where different places have a lot of paranormal time differentiation activity and stuff.
Linda's an experiencer, and she makes no secret of her strong belief that the US government has a secret underground military base hidden literally in plain sight near the town of Sedona. We travelled to Sedona to hear her evidence and to see for ourselves her claim that we would view anomalous, unexplained objects moving in the sky. I will freely admit I was super skeptical. I expected to be seeing satellites that were mistaken for UAPs. But what we saw during our time with Melinda was thought-provoking. It really does make me wonder if something covert is actually going on in this beautiful part of the Arizona desert. Late at night, we saw huge glowing orb objects hovering over some mountains, being escorted by what appeared to be military helicopters. A very intriguing sight. Here's Melinda Leslie. Our investigation takes us now to Sedona, Arizona, long considered the spiritual home of the American New Age. It's also a UFO hotspot, and if you believe the locals, they think they've got the answer to crack our mystery. Melinda, why did you get into UFO tours? What got you into it?
Well, my whole interest in this subject started in 1989 on a last-minute fluke of a trip out to Area 51 in Nevada and having amazing sightings, like mind-blowing sightings, including structured craft, meaning like seeing all the hard edges. And I met other researchers out there, and I had 3 back-to-back trips in September and October of '89 out to Area 51.
Some of this has already been over. This is 1 month ago, but I want to go over some of this again.
Going from Southern California out there, and that started it. That started my interest. I had, like I said, sightings and met researchers out there. One of those researchers had a lecture series in California, and I started, I lived in California at the time, but in LA, and I started to go to that. And so I became very interested in the subject after those sightings.
Why Sedona?
Sedona has always been a hot spot for constant UFO sightings. Even the Native Americans living here going back thousands of years said they had regular contact with the star beings. To them, having sightings is no big deal. Then we have our vortexes. That is kind of the leading theory as to what's drawing the UFOs. The vortex is an increased electromagnetic field spiraling up from the ground.
And it's scientifically measured and detected?
Yes, it has been. For instance, I have a friend who has like a geology company that finds oil and minerals and different, things like that for different companies. And he has scanning equipment. He has brought it here, and he lives in Seattle, Washington. In Seattle, Washington, he gets a baseline reading on his equipment of 40, whatever that might mean. But he says he comes to Sedona and detects an increase in the electromagnetic field that anywhere in Sedona, he gets a baseline reading of 80. And then certain of the vortex locations, or what we call our vortices, those areas, he's gotten a reading as high as 120, and he said it's the highest reading he's ever had on his equipment.
Has he measured Bradshaw Ranch, do you know? I mean, there's talk of a vortex or some kind of portal at Bradshaw Ranch.
Yeah, all of Sedona is a big vortex. Certain areas in Sedona are known for this increased electromagnetic field. Like I said, he's detected that with his equipment. But Bradshaw is known as a portal area where strange things are seen to, not just UFOs, but strange animals and creatures are seen to come and go.
Yep.
It is well known as kind of a paranormal portal.
So let's roll back a bit.
Okay.
Most people watching this will think this is all rubbish.
Yes.
They'll say there's no such thing as portals, there's no such thing as vortices, UFOs are nonsense. What do you say to them?
Well, for instance, the vortex, there's science to back it up. Like I said, my friend who owns this company that finds oil and minerals has detected it repeatedly.
And so there's a huge anomaly.
There's a huge, increased electromagnetic field. And then there's two schools of thought on why that's drawing the UFOs. One is that they're getting some kind of energy from it. I don't think it's strong enough, so I personally am not a big supporter of that theory. But the other theory is that it's like navigation beacons, that these vortices locations are...
As I've talked about before, is that so like New Mexico, where some of these rocks at different locations, which we're going to get into different stuff here about some rocks containing uranium and stuff like that. I've heard of stories where UFOs have used energy off of electric lines in the desert and around different cities sometimes. So I don't find that too far-fetched. There have been reports of 1 billion gallons of water missing from this South American lake. I could probably do that on another platform, but not on YouTube because of copyright and stuff. Where, other intelligence need water resources that Earth happens to have in other places in the solar system as well. So,
are somehow being used for navigation by craft coming and going.
So you take it as read from your experience that the phenomenon is something not of this world.
Well, I have done now, as of my last tour, which people you knew were with me. Okay, so that was tour number 1,839. Tonight's tour will be 1,840. I can say unequivocally from all the tours that I've done that sightings here are extremely real. We have had fully structured craft, that's where you see all the hard edges on something, 65 times on my tour.
Do you have photographs of those?
We have some, yeah. A lot of times we're caught up in the moment. You probably know with sightings, you're caught up in the moment. People don't, I've had clients come with video cameras with the intent on filming, get so caught up in the moment that they forget to. And the thing is, you kind of have to film the whole time because you never know when something like that is going to happen. And most people...
That's the thing. When I've had UFOs like, come up, when I've had a camera or sometimes I'm talking to somebody, and you can't always get that focus on it. And a lot of times what I've gotten is very shitty. So, I mean, you don't want to put that up and have that on for people. It's just, what looks like crap. Then people will say, hey, you need to focus, you need to learn how to focus. You can't with the stupid phone, unless you already have the stuff ready in front of you. So,
they're not filming the whole time, and they're waiting for something to happen. Well, by the time it happens, it can often be too late. But yes, I do have videos and some photos, yes.
So take me through, piece by piece, take me through each type of sighting that you have.
Oh, goodness. Well, the majority of what we see, granted, are lights at high altitude. But when you can rule out satellites and you get things that stop, turn, change direction.
How do you rule out satellites?
Well, I spend a lot of time in the beginning of my tour covering how to know if it's satellites. And I've learned a lot of information from taking out people who work with satellites for a living. I'm very blessed that a very dear friend of mine owns a satellite company. So I've learned a lot from these individuals.
Yeah.
And satellites have certain limited parameters to what they can do. So once you have something make a right angle turn or zigzag or suddenly increase speed and shoot off, these are all things satellites cannot do.
It's not a satellite.
Yeah, you got it. Or fly in formations, another thing satellites. Now, Starlink is a formation, but that has limitations to what it can do. So when you get a small cluster of 5, 6, 7 things flying together and making a turn at the same time, well, that rules out everything else.
Okay, so if something's in geostationary orbit or tracking a known path in orbit, you don't assume that that's something anomalous.
No. I tell my clients, we watch everything to see what it's going to do. If it goes one speed, unchanged, from horizon to horizon, okay, then we saw a satellite.
Yeah.
But if it does anything else, like turns, zigzags, speeds up, slows down or stops, or flies in a formation, then not a satellite.
So let's go through it. You've talked about a giant structured craft. What shape was that?
Well, we have seen that a total of 65 times on my tour. So I can just give you a quick breakdown of things we've seen. So 9 times we've seen big solid stripes, actually 10 times now, because Ross, I'm not even sure I told you this. 5 weeks ago, we had a triangle craft go over us, followed by a military jet. And I told my clients that's the 7th time we've had a military jet follow and or chase something we've seen. That's happened 7 times now. But that was the 7th time. And that was a triangle.
You're in no doubt that there's clearly a connection between the two objects, the military jet,
that
it was there.
The object, the triangle, came towards us as a large amber light. Amber meaning anything kind of orange or red. It was kind of an orangey red color. So it comes towards us. And as it came towards us, we realized here comes a jet, and the object wasn't going that fast. But the jet comes in really fast, comes up right behind the object, slows down, and parks himself immediately behind it. I mean, like tailgating right behind it. And then as it came over us, we could then see the shape of the object. That was a little bit larger than the jet. And it was a distinct triangle. And the jet was right behind it. Like it looked like it was almost going to touch it. And as it flew, it was coming from the west. As it flew east, eventually the object, meaning the triangle, disappeared, leaving the jet flying by itself.
When you say disappeared?
Just completely disappeared. We've seen that many times on my tour. We'll see a structured craft that it'll do, I call it winking out, just winks out, disappears all at once.
I've
So
seen
you've
that.
described an amber light, a triangle. What other shapes do you see?
Okay, well, we've seen triangle, like I just said, 10 times. We've seen disc, that's your classic flying saucer round with a dome on it. We've seen that on 4 tours. We've had oval shapes. They were like pumpkin seed, like flat ovals. We've seen that on a total of, I think, about 7 tours now. And 2 of those tours were multiple oval objects. One of those nights, I had a big special event I was doing a skywatch for. And it had like 100 people at it. That special event, those people who were present figured that we'd seen at least 7.
Real quick, again, shout out to News Nation. This is Ross Coltart here. Good shout out again. Legal reasons, especially for YouTube. So
Ovals in under a 15-minute window that night.
How do you know what you're looking at? How do you know, for example, that the oval object wasn't a well-lit helicopter, for example?
No, because helicopters blink. They're required by the FAA,
Right.
Federal Air Administration, to have strobes on them. All planes and helicopters are required to have this.
And you've got videos showing.
Yes, showing this, yeah. And so single blink is usually commercial or private, single, a very mechanical, consistent blink pattern. If it's a fast double, fast triple, particularly if it's a fast triple, blink, 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 like that, that's usually military aircraft. And military aircraft have a different strobe, so all other planes know it's military and get out of the way. They always have the right of way, even in non-combat situations.
Right.
So we see things that are clearly military aircraft. Ever since 9/11 Patriot Act, it's very, very common to have military patrolling the skies over cities. And I have taken out a handful of military pilots even on my tour. And they say from Luke Air Force Base, which is the closest place with such aircraft at it, near to here, which is right outside of Phoenix, is an hour and a half away as the crow flies. They say in about 15 minutes at regular patrol speed, they can fly over Sedona. They said if they're in a hurry, they can be here in 5 minutes. So we have constant military jets patrolling this area.
So the important thing is you can tell the difference between a fighter jet, a military helicopter, commercial aviation. You can distinguish that from what you're seeing.
Yes, and when we get that amber light, I've taken out plasma physicists on my tour, physicists and plasma physicists. Lots of physicists, probably 100, but plasma physicists, I would say I've taken out a handful, three, 4, 5 maybe. This is what they've told me. In the lab, they create a highly charged energy field, so massively charged, that it'll ionize the air around it. That ionization is called electrical plasma. In the lab, when they create that, they kind of know they've got plasma or ionization when they get amber light. They get gold, and more power it goes orange, and more power it goes red. Well, we see that very commonly on my tour. It used to be that we saw it about 2 out of 3 tours. We get amber light 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 times a night. Now with this new activity where we're seeing things come and go from our underground base out here, we are seeing it's very common to have it happen like 20 times a night.
Now you just casually mentioned, yes. There the holy grail of
yes.
our investigation.
Yes.
People talk about an underground base. You say with certainty that there is one.
Well, there is a tremendous amount of evidence, a lot of eyewitness accounts. I've lived here 13 years. I've been coming on and off since the early 80s. I've heard myself at least 20 accounts of people who were out hiking and stopped by guys all in black, Kevlar vests, combat boots on, M16s over their shoulder. So I've known, I have to think about it, but at least 4 people who've been stopped at gunpoint where the guns were drawn.
But this is on public land.
Yes. Yeah, and you could be out hiking. You could hike one of our trails and one of our canyons 100 times and never see these guys. But maybe on 101, you run across these guys. So if they have something going on in that area, they will stop you and turn you around. And sometimes at gunpoint. I've even heard a few stories of people who had confrontations with them and even got a little bit roughed up in the process. I can tell you when you run into these guys,
Yeah, one of the things that I was doing on here from News Nation as well is where a couple owned a farm or a house, I should say house, and owned some land there, and they've been shot at, stuff like that and everything. So
you say yes sir and you walk away. You don't give them a bad time because they will get aggressive.
If there is an underground base, which does my head in that they would do it so close to a place like Sedona, why would they locate? Why would they locate a military facility, presumably with very, very sensitive, top secret equipment, right next to a major tourist attraction?
Well, first off, I think it was there long before this became a tourist attraction.
Yeah.
I think there's evidence that construction was going on this facility back in the 50s before this place was known. It was really in the early 80s that this became a go-to place. It's considered...
One thing is that the Southwest, 4 corner states of Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah right there, is that we do have underground bases. We got bases inside of, mountain or whatever, and we have stuff, Grand Canyon, secret programs we've had there. And a lot of this is due because we've had stuff happening there for thousands of years, paranormal activity of different sorts, whether it's UFOs, cryptids, Bigfoots, whatever. A lot of time differentiation, time bending type stuff. So because of that, I mean, the military's drawn there because they've heard of stuff over the ages as well. And from the tribal nations, they listen to some of the paranormal stuff they've gone through. So with that, they said, hey, we got to go over here. We got ETs talking to us as well. And we got paranormal stuff happening here. We can hide stuff here. If they're on tribal land, they can get away with a lot more stuff than being around the cities and other military installations. If it's underground or in the side of a mountain, etc. So
Mecca for New Agers,
So they were there first.
Yeah, so we think they were here first, exactly. Or, well, there were the early settlers here. There was the film industry here from Hollywood making a lot of the famous westerns here. Yeah. So all that went on in the area.
Western
and
movies.
So, but it's on one side of a major hill range. The other side of that hill range is Sycamore Canyon, which is 7 miles long, 3 miles wide, and the next closest civilization beyond that is 15 miles away. So you have basically 7 miles by 15 miles of absolutely nothing, surrounded by mountains. I think it's obscurity. I think they probably did it there because it was hidden from everything.
You're pretty sure.
Yes.
You just take it as read that there's an underground base.
Well, I've heard so many accounts of people getting stopped. Some of these have been friends. One gentleman is a client of mine who's been stopped at gunpoint twice. I do not doubt his account at all.
But there's no military base anywhere in that area.
Exactly. It's deep underground. It's hidden.
It's Bureau of Land Management land most of the time.
On the surface, yes. But down underneath, it's covert black ops military. And
that sounds like crazy stuff.
I know it does, but that's what people have run-ins with, and that's what the evidence shows. As I know you're aware that another TV show did a scan and came up with thousands of feet of a perfectly 50-foot wide tunnel deep underground running under an area that's very famous for paranormal activity, our Bradshaw Ranch.
So how do you find these objects? What do you use? What technology?
On my tours, we use PVS 7 Generation 3 military night vision goggles. They put out infrared and they increase the amount of light you see by roughly 50,000 times. So you get to see, close to like 50,000 times more stars than you could ever see with your naked eye. And the beauty of those, it's allowing us to see stuff that's up high that maybe would be too faint or too dim or too far away to see with your eyes. They don't increase distance, they just increase light. But that's the beauty of them is being able to see these things that are up high. Occasionally, though, we get things very low, including when I said we've seen fully structured craft. That's usually very close and very large.
How often have you seen military jets, planes, or helicopters right next to these objects?
Well, now we've had them follow or chase them. So right behind them, follow or chase them 7 times.
And do you think they're accompanying them, i.e. their US stuff, or do you think they're chasing them because they're not US stuff?
In that case, I would say chasing or checking them out.
Yeah.
My clients comment that it looks like they're getting pulled over by the police. The police are right on your tail. And who knows? It's like maybe they're saying you're flying too close to the city. You're not supposed to be here. Who knows? But on my tours with this late night activity we're having of these large amber lights, again, the plasma field, something is bleeding such a huge energy, it's ionizing the air around it. Now, along with our seeing those, one of those nights, one of those amber lights flew over us, and that was when we had a triangle. 2 other researcher friends of mine, I know you're talking to, Jeremiah and Alexandra, were out at Bradshaw Ranch and had a big triangle right over them that we, on my tour, were 5 miles away. 5 miles away, we saw a giant amber light over that area and then disappear. They were right under it. They were out at Bradshaw that night and said it was a triangle, and then it shot straight up.
You mentioned Sycamore Canyon,
Yes.
which is in the quaintly named Secret Mountain.
Yes.
I mean, if this is a secret, it's a pretty stupid secret
Well,
to call it secret.
I'll one-up you on that. So, yes, there's Sycamore Canyon. There's the Secret Mountain,
Well, nobody
Secret Mountain
hardly knew
Wilderness
about
Range.
before. So I mean,
Beyond that is Secret Canyon, and beyond both of those is another canyon called, no joke, Government Canyon.
You're kidding.
No, you can look it on Google Earth. It's Government Canyon and Secret Canyon.
And do you know
That's,
anything about-
Ross, that's what you call hiding in plain sight.
Absolutely.
I mean, I heard from people in the 60s, you know, people, you know, from 1960s, they say, you know, that they saw weird stuff and they felt part of the cosmic universe and weird stuff happening there. It's like, thing is, these are the same people that get high and do stuff, so it's like, you didn't know whether to take them seriously. I mean, even the paranormal stuff I already knew that was happening there, you didn't know whether to take their story seriously or not because they're on drugs. Or some of them weren't, some weren't, but some were, so you never know who to believe, what stories to believe or not. But
Do you know anything about the claims that there are early maps, early military maps that show this particular area as being a military base?
All I know is that there are some early maps showing it to be restricted airspace in a big, like, perfect triangle. If you think of the mountain range that we're seeing stuff come over right now, being the end of that triangle, one edge, then it goes back like this, beyond that. And so I do know of aerial, in fact, I believe I might have one that someone once gave me, showing restricted airspace. It's no longer officially restricted airspace.
But the interesting thing is, even though there's no base there, there's meant to be nothing there. It's meant to be wilderness.
Yes.
Officially. It's government, Bureau of Land Management land.
Well, and it's a little interesting that there is nothing there. It's beautiful red rock country. It looks like Sedona, but there's
Bars.
nothing
Looks
there.
like
And you think, why
bars.
wouldn't they have expanded or done something? It's the fact that there is absolutely
Some
nothing
places.
there. I find a little bit suspicious in itself.
In some of your videos, you use the term power up. What does that mean?
Power up means it suddenly gets a lot brighter.
oh yeah.
We don't actually know that it's powering up. What we just call it a power up because suddenly the light we're seeing gets a lot brighter.
Pulses.
Well, yeah, it just gets suddenly
And is that the plasma
significantly
glow
brighter.
that you think your physicist friends think is what's linked?
Yes, yeah, because then with the naked eye, if you lower the night vision right away, you can only see green in the night vision. Everything you see is shaded green. But when you lower the night vision, you get that amber light, which means gold, orange, or red.
So what I'm interested in is you've realized that using night vision goggles, image light intensifying goggles, you can see things that probably people wouldn't see with the naked eye.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Now, about a third of what we see each night, you can see with your own eyes. And certainly, when something powers up, because you cannot see color in the goggles, I tell my clients, if something starts to do what we call power up, just meaning it gets brighter, to immediately lower your goggles, and then you'll see with your own eyes the color.
And what color is it normally?
The amber light, gold, orange, or red. Now, occasionally, we have gotten blue or green. Those same plasma physicists tell me in the lab, after you get like gold, orange, and then red with more power, eventually with enough power, it's like 30 to 50 times more, you get shades of blue, because it shifts to a different frequency of blue. And then after the blue, that much more power, like 50 times more power again, you get green, another frequency of plasma.
How many times on your tours have you and your group detected anomalous objects?
I guarantee sightings your money back. We see them every time. It's just a slow night would be 20 and a high night would be 100. I mean, we're getting a tremendous amount of sightings.
Where does Secret Mountain fit into this? Because you see stuff everywhere, I
Yes.
understand. What's happening with that Secret Mountain area in what is meant to be empty wilderness area that you're starting to see?
Started last September. I had a tour run a little bit later. One of my clients was looking with the night vision and started to see when normally the activity would taper off later. It's angle of sunlight illuminating things. The same reason you see satellites is why we see the most amount of these also in the first hour after sunset. Then it tapers off. We were well beyond the 2 hours, and then all of a sudden, two things happened. My client, we were just sitting around talking, happened to look with his night vision towards the hills. And he said, Melinda, there's a lot of military aircraft. By that point in the tour, he was well versed in seeing military jets and helicopters. And he said, Melinda, there's a lot of military. Is this normal? So I took my goggles and looked up, and I went, oh no, this is not normal. I've never seen this. And then we noticed the objects coming in, appearing in the sky, and going behind the hills.
Anomalous objects.
And then anomalous objects.
What
and
were
then,
they, orbs?
They amber lights.
And what happened?
And then they were coming up from behind the hills and going up. And he said, have you ever seen this before? And I went, oh, heck no.
Tell me where you're seeing this.
Okay. Secret Mountain wilderness area, or Secret Mountain, and that's a layer of mountains. It's like mountain ranges. And then Bear Mountain, which is a part of that.
I've been noticing how nervous she is talking about this stuff. She's really nervous about this. I've been noticing that from when I first saw this.
Kind of in front of it, behind what is called Coxcomb Formation, like the comb on a rooster, the rooster's head, Kasner Mountain, which is a big mesa, and Black Mountain. So we're seeing it behind those. Well, what's behind all that is Sycamore Canyon and Secret Canyon as well.
Okay. I have to speak for probably 99% of the people watching this, and most people watching this are going to say, look, it's utterly implausible that there would be a deep military base dug into a hillside right next to a tourist town, where they know somebody like you has got military night intensifying binoculars.
It's in a big canyon on the other side of mountains. Area 51, which is well known, is right next to Las Vegas. When you look at that in an aerial map, it's Vegas, outside surrounding area, and then a hill range, and then Area 51. So as the crow flies, it's only a couple miles away.
So do you get any military or intelligence people coming along on your tours?
Yes, I've had lots of military and intelligence people come on my tours.
And what do they say?
I bet.
Now, usually they're just clients who happen to say why they're out with me, at least the appearance is, and I have no reason to think otherwise, that they're just clients who are saying, by the way, I thought I should disclose, I'm with the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, I'm with the DOD, Department of Defense, I'm with the military, I'm an astronomer, an astrophysicist, like, a plasma physicist, these kinds of things.
And what do they say when they see what you're showing them?
They say it's highly anomalous, and I pretty much blow their mind, quite frankly.
And so, if you're right, a section of the US military is secretly involved in some way with clearly anomalous phenomena.
Yes, I think there is tremendous evidence, as you're probably finding in your investigation, that there is a reverse engineering program, and that we have developed stuff from crash retrievals and reverse engineered it. And this may be now this base, as crazy as it sounds, is known for having ETs and humans working together at it. Now, I know that sounds so nuts to people, but what if that's going on? Then we might be seeing some ET craft in that mix as well. It's so much that we're seeing. A high-level intelligence friend of mine that I ran this by said, how much you seeing in a peak hour, like when it peaks and the most stuff coming and going from the base? He said, give me a conservative count. I said, conservatively, 50 to 100 things. And he said, Melinda, anything over 30 would be an armada, and we're planning on something. So I now have the question, what are we seeing? I'm not claiming to know absolutely. I know we're seeing objects under intelligent control freely come and go, and we haven't really addressed this much, but a high amount of military aircraft, military helicopters swarming the area at the same time. I mean, like a lot. And so, I mean, it's sometimes we'll do a count, and I'll count, and I call it, over the hills. I'm looking over the hill range, and my clients will say, how many military? Sometimes I'm counting up to 20 helicopters hovering over the hills at a time.
When you say the hills, you're referring to that
those mountains.
Yeah,
Secret Mountain, Bear
base,
Mountain, Kasner Mountain, Black Mountain, over that.
Now, military planes have transponders as much as civilian planes, but they can turn them off. Have you looked on the Flight Aware or any of those apps that allow you to monitor?
No, I have not. I have not. It's just been self-evident because we've seen it so much. And we know that they're military because they have that fast triple. And experts like military and intelligence people coming out with me have said repeatedly, those are helicopters. Based upon their flight patterns, are clearly helicopters.
So you've got well over a decade, 13 years of experience seeing these objects in Sedona.
Yes.
Are they the US's machines or are they someone else's?
Good question. That's my question. I don't know the answer to that, quite frankly. I think what we've seen over the years and things up in the sky, and the majority of it and the large structure craft we've seen are ET because of the highly anomalous nature to how they fly, how they act. There's a consciousness interaction. That sounds crazy as well, I know, but with the viewer on the ground, there's a consciousness interaction.
You had that happen to you?
Absolutely.
What do you mean?
For instance, sometimes I'll get a strong sense that we really need to pay attention or look in a certain area of the sky, and then something happens.
They know you're there?
Apparently, because the other thing we do, that's more obviously knowing we're there, we use laser pointers for pointing stuff out. We flash at them with the lasers. We get these objects to flash back at us. I doubt the military's flashing back at us. Sometimes we'll go 1, 2, 3, and they'll even go 1, 2, 3 back at us.
So how do you know it's not some guy in a helicopter?
Because if you're seeing structured craft and you're lasering it and it's a big disc or a triangle, or we've also seen cylinders, we've seen big boomerang shapes, and the lasers also reflect off of it, so you know you're getting metal. And then these objects, not only will they flash back at us, but then immediately they'll disappear. Or they'll shoot straight up like a bullet. They take off like, pew, straight up like a bullet.
And have you got video of that?
Some. Yes, we have some. Yes. The easy answer is yes. It's disappointing to me that I don't have more, but we're often caught up in the moment. And when people see me on my tour with the clients, I'm caught up with the clients. It's really hard. But I've had friends come film for me. And so, yes, we have caught some of it.
So you've been seeing an increase in this anomalous activity since September 2023.
Yes.
Can you explain
huge
that?
Increase.
Why?
Something going on with the only thing that makes sense because of where we're seeing it is it's related to the base.
So you think there's objects moving in and out of the base that you think is there?
They're coming in over that area and going down behind the hills where the base is known to be, and they're coming up from that area. So I think therefore there's and the amount of military present is it's as the helicopters come in and start swarming. I know the activity is about to get really good based upon more military suddenly coming in. So as more of those helicopters come into the area and start going back and forth over the hills, boom, sure enough, this activity picks up. It's very clear to my clients. There's a direct correlation between the two.
Because those helicopters are searching to make sure that humans are not videotaping all this stuff, even though you are watching from a distance. They want to make sure that there are not humans hiding in those hills right there, videotaping stuff and everything. So that's what those helicopters and everything that those helicopters are there for.
Turned hardened skeptics into believers when they come along on your tours?
Many, thankfully, yes.
I understand one of your clients was Jim Semivan, former CIA
That's correct.
executive. What happened to him?
Yeah, he's seen stuff with me. I mean,
he went on to become a member of TTSA, the Stars Academy.
Well, he was already when he came, on my tour. But yes.
Was he impressed with what he saw?
Yes, absolutely.
So you've had quite a lot of high-powered people, haven't you?
I've had quite a few. Yeah.
Very senior intelligence roles.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
Has anyone ever sidled up to you and said, "Look, this is really inconvenient for us. Would you stop doing this?" Has anybody?
No, never. The people I've had are more like, okay, yeah, like they had it confirmed that their suspicions were real or that their knowledge, if they had any inside knowledge, was confirmed.
So this is really cool. So there are people from the military and intelligence community who want to satisfy themselves that this is going on.
Absolutely.
And you're providing them with evidence.
Absolutely.
So can we come up with...
As awkward as it seems, but see, I know you know by now how it works. You're read into these deep deep black programs. And if you're not read in, you're not read in. So even if you're a senior person, like you were number 3 in the CIA, doesn't necessarily mean you're read in on these, as crazy as that sounds. But you either are, it's so compartmentalized, you're either read in or you're not. So people who are not read in, but have heard things through the grapevine, or even know things officially, want to see it for themselves to confirm that knowledge.
Well, Melinda, we'd like to see it for ourselves. Can we come out with you this evening?
Please come. I'm looking very forward to showing you.
This is your secret spot, Melinda.
Yes, yes.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Night vision goggles, chairs, what else do we need?
Yeah. Everyone's going to grab whatever they need.
I'll get the chairs. So it's coming up to midnight, and Melinda's told me that for the last few months, especially since September of 2023, she's been seeing increased activity, anomalous objects doing extraordinary things in the skies over Secret Mountain, and often escorted by dozens of military helicopters. So we're hoping we might see some tonight. Okay, Melinda, what are these things?
Well, these are the PVS-7 Generation 3 military night vision goggles, and they allow us to see roughly 50,000 times more light than see with our naked eyes. So we're going to be able to see these objects hopefully 50,000 times better.
So when we go to the top of this hill, what are we looking across at?
Well, we're going to be looking up mostly, and when we look at the night vision, you'll see we're very near the top of the mountain range. So
Secret Mountain.
Yes, that's right, Secret Mountain.
Let's go and try and crack Secret Mountain's secrets.
Yes, absolutely.
Talk me through what's happening at the moment. Where are we sitting and what are we looking across at?
Well, we're in an undisclosed location where we're up on the hills. We're kind of almost up on the Secret Mountain area. So this is all Secret Mountain wilderness here that we're looking at. And
I can see right now,
so we're looking for anything moving. Now, there's
an orb straight ahead of me, just probably
above
probably 4 fingers above the lower of the little mountains there. So what have you been seeing in the last few months over this area out in front of us?
Coming up behind the hills, we'll see large amber lights, powered up, already very bright.
And I have to say I saw those earlier with you when we were with your clients.
That's right, at the other location. So now we're just we're like 5 miles closer and at a much higher altitude. And so we're just looking to see if lights are coming up behind the hills, because right on the other side of this hill we're looking at, or this mountain we're looking at, is both Secret Canyon and Sycamore Canyon, which is where the majority of the base is. So we're right there. It's under these hills and on the other side from where we are, probably 5-6 miles to our immediately left or to the west is where Bradshaw is.
Now earlier on,
let's see, I update this a little bit here. Hold on. Let's see here. See here. I have it already on here on YouTube. Let's see. Let's see here. Damn it. Let's see. Why the hell? Isn't it? I should be able. Why the hell does it say what it is on here? I have it on there, but I'd have to do it another time. Alright. Frag it. Let's get back.
When we were with you with your clients, which was, say, about 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night, there were, I think, possibly up to a dozen helicopters.
Yes, and I expect we'll see those coming in here. We're higher up, so it'll be a matter of standing and looking all directions. But I suspect we'll see quite a few of the military helicopters.
I mean, it can't be cheap. I mean, that's a lot of money being spent on choppers.
Yeah, I mean, you know, earlier, even that much earlier at the other location, when I would count how many were over the hills at one time, it was usually about 10 were over the hills at one time. And some nights it's as many as 20 to 25.
I see what you mean too about how you can clearly delineate satellites.
Yes.
Because they're just moving at a constant speed over the sky. The objects we're seeing are, well, in some cases changing course.
There's a shooting star, yeah. Yeah, I mean, changing course, flying in formations. We had a great formation of 3 at the other site that remained in a perfect triangle formation for a long time before they got smaller and dimmer and closer together. Like 2 cars going down the road away from you would get smaller as they move away from you. Well, that showed that they were going up away from us, out of the atmosphere.
Where's Bradshaw Ranch from here, Melinda?
Well, I was saying about 5 miles. It's actually more than that,
So
but
that
it's
way.
to our left, to our west, yeah. It's direct to the west of us. And
Wouldn't it be great
we're kind
if-
of facing due north right now.
Wouldn't it be great if right now a giant black triangle hovered up
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
zoomed off into infinity?
I would like for nothing better to happen for you to see.
Have you
Ross.
seen
Looks
that?
like a can.
Have I seen that? Yeah, I've seen large black triangles 10 times.
Wow, really?
Yeah, yeah. As I said earlier today, 6 weeks ago, about 6 weeks ago, we saw a amber light coming towards us from the west. We were at the other location, and in came a military jet behind it.
So there's a chopper in the saddle over there.
Yes.
It's just in that low saddle, just sitting just above the saddle. It's like it's waiting for something. In fact, there are 2 choppers.
Yes. Yes, that's right. There's one right there. Yep. And we'll see more. We'll see a lot more.
So earlier on in the evening, I was with Melinda when she was with some of her clients, and we were in another location, and we saw dozens of military helicopters hovering over Secret Mountain. Now, I'm not jumping to conclusions, but we did see on 2 or 3 occasions large orbs rising from Secret
Yeah.
Mountain, pulsing. That's the only way I can describe it, pulsing with a glow. And what do you,
Amber to the naked eye,
what
which
do you
means
call
plasma.
it? You call it powering
We call
up.
it powering up because a lot of times they get big and bright right before they're going to disappear. So they get big and bright and disappear.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did. They disappeared.
Yeah.
So literally, they came up from the mountain, powered up, pulsed,
behind the mountain.
big glowing amber orbs, and then they quietly drifted off. In some cases, changing course, and then faded into nothing.
Yeah, and sometimes winked out all at once, and sometimes faded out, and then we saw 3 objects in a perfect triangle formation that all headed up and out together in unison, getting smaller and dimmer in unison.
So, what are the skeptics going to tell me these things are, Melinda?
Well, a lot of people instantly say satellites without being here
No,
to
these
see it.
can't possibly be
Yeah,
satellites.
to know the difference. Yeah.
I know what a satellite does.
Yeah, and when you see
Satellites
something
don't change
turn,
course.
yeah, they don't change course. They don't turn. They don't speed up. They don't stop, and they don't fly in formations. Yes, Elon Musk SpaceX Corporation is 20 in a line or more, but in these tight little formations that then dim out all in unison, and etc. There's just so many things we're seeing that you could, and going way too fast to be satellites, and speeding up. So it really takes seeing it to understand what you're seeing. And there's nothing on a satellite that can produce a big amber light.
So there's another chopper there.
Yeah.
Okay, so John, I'm interested in what you're seeing here because I'm worried my eyes are deceiving me. I'm seeing objects in some cases rising from below the mountain. They kind of pulse for a while and then they move off. Are you seeing that?
I'm seeing that, and I'm seeing multiples. I'm seeing groups of 5, groups of 7, just coming from behind that mesa and moving off to that
This is
direction.
tribal.
And the other thing I found
police
fascinating, because I was convinced these must be satellites, I was trying to disprove you, Melinda, and then the blooming things change course.
Yes.
Have you seen them changing course as well?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
And I've seen the ones that zigzag before.
Yes.
So it's not surprising to me, but it's just like, they're there.
What are they?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, if we know about this stuff, like I do, and some of these other people, and about cryptids, other beings and stuff like that, it's like, yeah, they're there. Yeah. It's nothing new. We already knew that. So, been there forever.
I mean, if you're going to say, okay, they're plasma, they're ball lightning, they shouldn't be up there that long and moving in the same direction.
But why would military helicopters be there? And I mean, I don't want to put words into your mouth, so you tell me, how many military helicopters or how many helicopters have you seen over there tonight?
I've probably seen 7 or 8 altogether.
That's a lot of money on choppers.
Helicopters use JP4 fuel. It's expensive.
Thousands of dollars.
Thousands of dollars to run per hour. And especially hovering. Hovering just tears those engines up. And so they rarely will want to hover.
And just so I'm clear, Melinda, where we're looking at right here, this is looking towards
Like tens of
Secret
thousands of
Mountain.
dollars.
Well, yeah,
tens of
this is
thousands
the
of dollars,
secret
yeah.
mountain wilderness that we're looking at here, these rock formations. And then there's layers of mountains and formations, but beyond them is Sycamore Canyon.
But where is Luke Air Force Base, which is the closest known base?
Hour and a half as the
Which-
crow flies.
in
It's
which
outside
direction?
of Phoenix. Due south, outside
which
of Phoenix.
direction? Point to a direction where it would be.
Behind us,
Right.
basically, if this is due north, it's due south.
So that way is meant to be empty wilderness.
Sycamore Canyon goes back 7 miles. It's about 3 miles wide. And when I do pin drops on Google Earth from like where we are to like a scattering of ranches way out in the wilderness, 15 miles out. So there's 7 miles by 15 miles of absolutely nothing.
Well, if nothing else, there are a lot of helicopters. We can't say they're military, but there are a lot of helicopters hovering at the one time over the one place in the same area that objects are moving anomalously. If nothing else, Melinda, I'm satisfied that I'm seeing a lot of military choppers, or just choppers.
Yes.
We can't say they're military, but there are choppers hovering and moving with purpose around other objects which are demonstrably anomalous.
Yes. There you go. I think you got it.
They're moving inconsistently with the track of a satellite because they're changing course. In one case I saw they're zigzagging.
Yes.
On occasion also they come up from behind the mountain there and they power up, they
Yes.
pulse.
Yes, they power up, and often at the moment that they do that, if you lower the goggles, that's when you see the amber, which according to plasma physicists I've taken on the tour, you're seeing electrical plasma. You're seeing something generate such a huge energy signature, it's ionizing the air around it. So you're seeing ionization of the byproduct of a propulsion system, and then that night when we had one come over us, that when it was immediately over us, it was a triangle.
Do you know, I would love, I don't know, Neil deGrasse Tyson or any of the skeptics to come here.
That guy is a rat. He's a dirty rat. He's lied about UFOs. You know, he's worked in the Pentagon. He's a part of the cover-up. I hate that guy. Real POS. And stuff. Anyways, so on here. But before we do, I need to put some food in the fridge, and just be right back. Yeah. Put this away. Well, All right. Okay. Right. Here we are.
Well, g'day and welcome back
Goodbye.
to Reality Check Q&A, where you get to ask me the hard questions. And to help me do that this week, of course, it's my colleague and good friend,
Geez.
producer, Megan Orada. G'day, Megan.
Ross, good day. How are you?
It's not AI. Let's see. I thought this would actually be. Let's see here. Before we get there, I want to get to. Here.
And if you looked at a particular place over Secret Mountain, you would see this big orb being escorted by helicopters rising from behind Secret Mountain. And we watched at 1:30 in the morning, and sure enough.
Okay, this is Jesse Michaels. Shout out. This stuff I've known about for decades. Of these places in the Four Corner states, and other places like Texas, Oklahoma, different places as well. Again, do this fair use and everything like that. YouTube, I don't want them to put my own experiences into this as well.
Up comes this beautiful golden orb,
Jesse Michaels.
gigantic. It pulses, it's plasmatic.
And so where my mind might go with that is that this is some sort of global control system.
Got an object about a mile behind us and it's following us. Let's hope they're friendly.
One of the first things that one of my sources in that Georgetown pub back in probably 2018 told me was, it's all about consciousness.
You've probably met more people in and around these programs than anybody else alive.
You are saying to the human race, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone.
Anyway,
I
he
knew that
chuckled.
before he did.
And I remember he just let slip something like, yeah, the
Lawless,
Americans
dude.
wanted that one shut down pretty quickly.
Whoa. It's a multi-minute long video of this thing flying in the
I've
air.
seen.
And there are symbols around the top. I showed photos of the symbols to Mario Woods and to Randy Anderson, and both of them freaked out.
We went to his home and saw this sphere apparently move under its own power. People have been murdered. Because I'm told that the briefing that the FBI gave in Congress really blew people away. I have no doubt they think they're going to get away with it.
Uh-huh.
And you know what?
Why?
They probably will.
Different parts of the brain have different activities.
You know that, don't you?
Maybe you should interview me.
I'm here with Ross Coulthart, who I have just so much gratitude to express. First of all, we've been waiting to do this for a very long time. I'm grateful you're in the
I
U.S.
haven't been avoiding you.
I know you haven't. But I just want to express my gratitude because we were talking before when the cameras weren't rolling. I feel like I am aerodynamically drafting behind you. I feel like you have done so much legwork in getting all these amazing scoops. And, often I'll do, a follow-up interview where, I have a lot of fun. But it's really, I just have so much, I owe you a debt. And I think humanity owes you a debt as well. And so I'm grateful for you sitting down.
It's a mutual admiration society, Jesse, because I often say to my family, how the hell does he do it? You seem like a jackrabbit
Yes.
everywhere I see it.
London
Have you just
stuff,
come back from
yes.
Colombia or
The
something? You're doing a
corporation
Boogosphere
outfit.
story?
I was in. Yeah, I was in. This is what's crazy, and I know you've experienced, I'm sure, all sorts of stories where like it starts a certain way, and then you have another story come up. So I was investigating these Peruvian mummies, these tridactyl, three-toed and fingered mummies from Peru. And then on the way back up to the U.S., I stop in Mexico City to meet with Jaime Maussan, who's a big proponent of this. And 2 days before, he happened to get this Buga sphere sent to him or whatever. And so I happened to be there.
I've got to know, what's your preliminary assessment? Is it real?
It's so hard to say.
Did you see what my friend Roni Vernay posted on Twitter? Saying
Repeat
that
it for the
a
audience.
fuel tank. And so there's a particular shape of fuel tank that is exactly 9 litres, and it's got similar holes to the one that Yami is relying on, and it does have the same seam running along the side. It looks like a direct visual match with a few changes, as if somebody's cosmetically altered it.
It's definitely remarkable, just the fact pattern. So, as you know very well, whenever you take a stance, a hard stance in this world, you get a ton of flack. So I'll just give you my fact pattern of what I've experienced, and then people can sort of decide for themselves. So Jaime Maussan was given this thing. It was taken in Buga, Colombia. That's why it's called the Buga Sphere. It was given by a guy. So this video was taken by this guy who is, I guess he does mining and metal detection underground, and it's a very long, it's a multi-minute long video of this thing flying in the air.
Seen.
You've seen the video, and then he picks it up in the forest, and there is a little gap in the video, so that does beget a question of provenance and why is there a gap in the video. And then he has it for a while in his possession. He ends up giving it to Jaime Maussan, and there are symbols around the top. Apparently it's an aluminum alloy that's 3 times the hardness of what we generally use in conventional aerospace. And then maybe the most interesting fact I can give you that is new to the audience as well is I showed photos of the symbols to Mario Woods and to Randy Anderson. Mario Woods, 1977 Ellsworth Air Force Base experiencer. And then Randy Anderson is this guy who was taken underground, at Crane, Naval Surface Warfare Crane, and was possibly shown some off-world technology. And both of them freaked out because it was like these were the symbols that they had both seen. Mario inside the craft.
I want to give you something because I'm not sure. And again, I am not avowing that this is my opinion.
Neither of us are endorsing the Buga Sphere. We are just, these are facts that we
we're
are
neither
listening.
endorsing nor debunking.
That's right.
But I did what I'm increasingly doing these days. I took a photograph of the sphere and I uploaded it to AI, and I asked AI, in this case I think it was Groke, and I said, can you please decipher these symbols for me? And it came back very quickly and said, the circuit. And that, I have to admit, made me think it was a hoax. Now, I'm not saying it's a hoax, okay? But what I am saying is that came back when I put it through AI. But AI is often wrong. But what I love about AI is that its ability to draw on symbology and numerology and all of these ideas. And it came back with this one phrase, the circuit.
Well, if you look at the top, it looks like a little semiconductor or a chip.
Yeah.
And then you have, this begets all these ontological questions of you have, I think his name is Patrick Jackson.
Yes.
You've done an amazing story. Everybody go watch Ross's story with this guy.
And I have seen one of these spheres in a different domain in the home of a beautiful man in Texas who is a good soul. And I can tell you, it may be the case that his sphere is now in the possession of Brandon Fugel, and the Skinwalker Ranch show is going to be paying to have that sphere properly investigated. There's a scoop for you.
That is.
I was going to run it on my show. So Jim Marlin is a former rock promoter who worked with Willie Nelson, and he has a house in Texas. And we went to his home and saw this sphere. I have to be careful, apparently move under its own power. And I mean, we were sitting with Jim for hours talking, and he was in a home where the floor had just been fixed, so it's perfectly level, and we verified that with a level. and the ball is sitting stationary on the floor, and then all of a sudden it starts moving, and there's a bar which has a pole coming down onto the floor. It goes up to the bar, and from memory it might have even circled the pole and then come back again part of the way. And there was no movement. We were all just sitting in a chair talking, and then Jim chortles and goes, "Oh, look at that." And it moves. Yeah.
Was there something that came up in the conversation? Was it aligned with anything synchronous?
No. And so when I ran that story on Channel 7 Australia, they, as usual, as TV networks are wont to do, beat the living daylights out of it, which is a journalistic term for flogging the story until it bleeds. And you know, all the promos were fancy, and it made it look like we were saying for sure that it was an anomalous object. We truly don't know for sure. And the great frustration for me for the past few years since I did that story in 2021 is every time I went to Jim and asked him, could we take it to go and get it tested, there was a lot of resistance. And it made me suspicious. But then he agreed to go and let it get tested. But the problem was when I was trying to find an X-ray place that does industrial X-rays, the first thing they want to know is, well, what's inside it? And I'm going, well, that's why we want to X-ray it. And I was expressing this dilemma only very recently on a show somewhere, and this gentleman rang me from Chicago and said that he would X-ray it in his industrial X-ray machine. And he had some other type of machine. Can't remember what it was. Might have been a CT. I'm not sure. Yeah. And he would run it through that as well. And it was for free. And I went to Jim and I said to Jim, I finally found a place that can test the ball for you, the sphere for you, because one of the things I get a lot of the inquiries about from our audience is, what happened to the sphere? You know, why haven't you told us the story about the sphere? And I was finally about to announce that we've got somebody who will allow us to do the testing on the sphere, because Jim won't let us cut into it for obvious reasons. And he told me, I'm sorry, Ross, Brandon Fugel's agreed to fly it in his private jet to Utah, where he's going to have it tested in the lab. And look, frankly, I'm really happy if that's going to be the case for Patrick, who I know, and for Jim, who's a beautiful guy, to finally get an answer. And Brandon, I've spoken to Brandon about it, and I've encouraged him to do it. And so hopefully it's all going to happen. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, let's hope. That's amazing. And I think Patrick, because you were talking about the chip, and so where my mind might go with that, again, I don't know if it's real, is that this is some sort of like global control system or something.
Well, Patrick's theory is that these spheres are part of a global defense system by some alien civilization to keep the bad guys out of Earth.
Right.
And I quite like Patrick. He's a very clever man.
Yeah.
He has an eclectic intelligence and he's fun. I honestly don't know how he could know that.
Right.
You know,
Sure.
and so, I mean, a lot of it is speculation. And he's got type 1 spheres and type 2 spheres. And often there'll be a photograph of a plane. And you see these spheres around planes in UAP events. So there's often a big, let's call it object rather than a craft. There's a big object that's clearly anomalous, sometimes beside an aircraft. And then if you look really closely, you'll see these dots that are these metallic spheres.
Satellites.
And when I did that story, I did that in 2021 for Australian TV, it just went nuts. It's been seen, that particular story, if you add the 2 iterations of the story, because we had to take one down because of copyright issues with music. It's been seen over 43 million times. Crazy. And so I was getting phone calls, messages, emails from people all over the world, including, I remember, a beautiful guy in Africa who told me that they were seeing these spheres. And what I can report is, whatever they are, I do think I can say they're real. They're a real phenomenon. Whatever they are, they're metal spheres with no visible means of propulsion. Dozens of people have told me that they've seen them flying or moving under their own locomotive power. there's no visible way in which they're moving.
Right.
And
No trail.
I don't honestly know
afterburners or
what to
anything.
conclude about them because, I mean, I expressed the enigma by telling the story, but like so much of this whole story, Jesse, I don't know about you, but I often feel like I've got my eyes closed and I'm kind of feeling in the dark and
That's
trying to
right.
get an idea about
Yeah.
what it is. And then as soon as I've got the texture and the feel of what's been in front of me here, I realised there's a whole other room over here of stuff that I've never got my brain around.
Yes.
And it's mind-bogglingly complex, whatever it is.
This episode is brought to you by my favorite new product, Masa Chips.
Yes,
Here's a quick
thank
history
you.
lesson. Before the 1990s, all chips and fries were
I got my Kool-Aid.
Then the big food companies swapped this ingredient out for cheap, highly processed seed oils. Today, seed oils make up 20% of the average American's calories,
great.
and they're linked
That's-
to all
that's-
sorts
that's
of
great.
bad things like
Hallelujah.
chronic. Jesse Michaels for
Yes,
25%
thank
off.
you, Michael.
Objects that were plasmatically glowing, but at the same time clearly solid, structured, in their words, craft.
Just heard from Wellington radar that we've got an object about a mile behind us and it's following us. Let's hope they're friendly.
Sierra Alpha Echo, there's a strong target right in formation with you now. Could either be left or right, but your target is double its size.
And for each of those people, it was a transformative moment. But what was really interesting for me as a journalist was I bought, as a teenage boy, the official government explanation. And I was doing my exams, I was really focused on my studies. There'd been the Valentich story of a young boy called Frederick Valentich who had disappeared
Australian.
in his Cessna aircraft flying over Bass Strait
Yeah.
in Australia just a few months before.
Right. I get
And
chills.
for somebody
I
who was
actually
really
feel
already
yeah.
very interested in the media, I kind of bought into the idea that this is just all a big media beat up because there's a big problem in the December-January period. It's the Christmas holiday period. The news is pretty boring. And so this was obviously a story that the media had leapt onto. And I just thought, yeah, this is just a big media beat up. What was interesting also was that the government had come out with an official explanation very, very quickly, which said that these were squid boat lights. And in New Zealand, there are these big Japanese fishing fleets that go off the coast with these gigantic lights.
Right.
And you often saw them as a
That's
kid.
bullshit,
And they were
yeah.
glowing on the horizon and they looked spooky. And so the theory that was pushed by the New Zealand Air Force was that these were squid boats, lights, and the captain, the co-pilot of one plane, and the captain and the co-pilot of another plane, even though they were flying at 14,000 feet, they were mistaken, and those objects were below them, and it was some kind of refraction in the air, blah, 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 blah. It all gave a reasonable tinge of explanation that made everybody in New Zealand think, oh, that was just a bullshit story during the Christmas.
Everything I know with the government and all the lies that politicians put out, I don't believe anything the government says. Nothing. It's rare that I do. Anyway.
Season, it's all over. For me, though, it was interesting because much, much later when I became a journalist, I was working for the New Zealand Herald newspaper and I met Sir Robert Muldoon, who was the former New Zealand Prime Minister. And he used to do these convivial little chats at Christmas time where a young reporter, me, had to drive up and interview him and talk to the former Prime Minister about whatever he wanted to talk about. And I decided, I don't know why, I knew he'd been the Prime Minister at the time. I decided to ask him, what about that Kaikoura UFO thing that happened when I was 16? And by that time, I think I was about 19 or 20, I can't remember. Anyway, he chuckled. And I remember he just let slip something like, yeah, the Americans wanted that one shut down pretty quickly.
Whoa.
And that, because I love espionage stories, and I love...
What a lot of people don't know is that America has been the primary country of keeping UFOs a secret around the world. Not so much as it be Russia or China, but mainly the U.S. They're the biggest superpower and stuff like that, biggest to lose. Secrecy coming out and everything like that. It's just the way that's been. We got a saucer out of Iran as well. Early 80s or late 70s as well. That was hushed and kept a secret in other parts of South America and other places around the world. We've had special operations go and retrieve those as well. So,
as a young New Zealander, I was always focused on books about espionage, and as you referred to earlier, one of the biggest stories I did in my time in Australia was I revealed the existence exclusively of the Echelon communications surveillance system, which is what the Five Eyes operate to intercept communications. And for the first time ever, I got from an intelligence service in Australia an official admission that there was a system called Echelon and it was involved in communications surveillance and spying. And so I was switched on to that issue all my life. I've always been really interested in spies and espionage. And so it twigged my interest that Sir Robert Muldoon was describing this admission that there'd been some kind of American intervention, but he wouldn't go any further. And then much, much later, when I was writing my book, I discovered that there'd been this release of the New Zealand archives in about 2011, and it essentially revealed the detail of what went on inside the Air Force in New Zealand to try and fix this problem as fast as possible. And it was quite clear these Air Force officers had been told, find a fucking solution as fast as possible. We want this off the front page. And it was quite clear enormous amounts of pressure was being put on the Chief of Air Staff, the head of the Air Force, by the Prime Minister's office to make this one go away, and hence the squid boat explanation. And then when I was writing my book, I met Quentin Fogarty, who'd been one of the reporters on the plane, who by complete chance, his son Ben was one of the chief cameramen at 60 Minutes, where I was working as a reporter. And so Ben said to me, my dad was the guy who was on that plane that night. And so I got to meet his father, another weird serendipity. And another one of the reporters was a political correspondent called Dennis Grant, of great renown later on in Australia. And Dennis confirmed all the story. And he introduced me to Bruce Maccabee, who was the atmospheric physicist who sadly recently died. And all of a sudden I realized that the story that I'd bought as a young teenage kid that basically told me this was bullshit was actually completely untrue. And there'd been a really elaborate cover-up. And that fascinated me. And it was one of the... Because I actually started out writing my book in about 2018 when I left 60 Minutes. I thought I wanted to do a book debunking UFOs. I was arrogant, and I had this assumption that all UFOs were nonsense, and it was only a matter of time. I'd read Nick Cook's Hunt for Zero Point, and he'd implied very strongly that there was some sort of secret US aerospace program. We obviously have heard all the rumours about the Aurora or the TR-3B, and I just assumed it was some kind of black world American technology, and that a bit of dutiful digging would no doubt reveal this, and somehow, for some inescapable reason, I would discover it and make my name by revealing that the whole UFO story was complete nonsense. But the more I got into the story, because of that Kaikoura story, everywhere I went, everybody was telling me this is real. And so I had sources from the original Echelon investigation I'd done and from people I'd met in Afghanistan and Iraq when I covered the war, who were in senior levels in intelligence and defence. And they facilitated introductions for me to people who privately, when we sat over a table in a bar, said, Ross, this is real.
Yeah.
And that only really happened for me more recently, while I was writing my book. And probably the biggest breakthrough moment for me where I went, holy heck, this is real, is when the technique I'd used to try and investigate this was, because of my knowledge of Echelon and how easy it is to intercept digital communications, I decided I wouldn't approach anybody that I thought might know something about this other than by using analog communication techniques. I wouldn't even use phones because, of course, there's a metadata, and we knew about that because of the Snowden revelations, that there was this metadata trail that essentially reveals
Snowden
that you can be...
is a fucking hero. I mean, he put out all the information about how the CIA, NSA builds all these sites just to spy on Americans more than Russians and Chinese combined. There's nothing good about our intelligence agencies. It's very corrupt. And how they monitor us and stuff like that. Just very criminal, what the CIA, NSA, intelligence companies, organizations do, and everything. So everything that we do is monitored by different companies. So
tracked, and they might not know the contents of the phone conversation, but they can certainly track a lot about your habits and your movements and who you're talking to by looking at the metadata. And so I wrote letters.
Sounds like true
Wow.
social
So
psychopaths.
I wrote, I think, about
like
160, 170 letters at last count. And a lot of it involved doing things like, I'm a lawyer by training, and so as a young trainee lawyer, I'd learned that a lot of stinky stuff happens in the discovery process and legal proceedings with documents that are maybe procured but not necessarily tendered in a court case. And they're often tangential to what you're trying to discover to prove the case that you're mounting, but there's some really juicy stuff in there. And so I don't want to go into too much detail, but there were some very helpful lawyers. And so I built up a name base of people that I thought might be interesting who'd been involved in litigation at Area 51. And in a layering and iterative process of doing what I do, which is basic investigative journalism, where you build up a chronology and you think who might know something about advanced aerospace, or who might have been working in a security role or a support role at that time in this area that might know something. You build up a name base. And so I wrote letters to people. And one of the glorious things about America is how ridiculously open every database is. And I could procure the home addresses of everybody that I wanted to write to, including some of the most important scientists in America.
Wow.
And what shocked me was one of the letters I wrote was to a guy called Nat Kobitz. And he was the former head of science technology development for the US Navy. And I'd written to him as an act of brazen cheek, to be perfectly honest. I honestly did not expect that somebody like him would respond.
What did Kobitz say?
He rang me, and I didn't talk UFOs with him for 3 months. And I realized, sadly, one of the reasons he wanted to talk to me was because he was a lonely, elderly man who, God bless him, was dying slowly of cancer. And he was in his daughter's home, and she was nursing him, and he was bored. And I was interested in talking to him, and he was talking to me about developing early drone technology.
Usually, for me knowing people in their final years, the final days, be around nursing homes, by myself and everything, is that you're never really listened to that much about your life. It's usually people just change your diapers, and don't care to get to know you that much, or gotten sick and tired of that, and you're never really listened to as a person. Very, very bad, very sad. How a lot of people are treated and stuff like that. So,
and how one of their drones had crashed in George Bush, the president's ranch, because the Secret Service had frequency blockers. And, they'd spent millions of dollars on building this drone, and the first time they flew it, I wrote, was to a guy called Nat Kobitz. And he was the former head of science technology development for the US Navy. And I'd written to him as an act of brazen cheek, to be perfectly honest. I honestly did not expect that somebody like him would respond.
What did Kobit say?
He rang me, and
geez.
I didn't talk UFOs with him for 3 months. And I realized, sadly, one of the reasons he wanted to talk to me was because he was a lonely, elderly man who, God bless him, was dying slowly of cancer. And he was in his daughter's home, and she was nursing him, and he was bored. And I was interested in talking to him, and he was talking to me about developing early drone technology and how one of their drones had crashed in George Bush, the president's ranch, because the Secret Service had frequency blockers. And, you know, they'd spent millions of dollars on building this drone, and the first time they flew it, because they flew into the Secret Service envelope, it crashed, and he went, there went a few $1,000,000, you know, and he had this wonderful Jewish Brooklyn sense of humor. And I became very friendly with him, and I used to really enjoy talking to him. There were things like he'd been involved in developing things on the lunar lander, and I knew somebody who'd worked on the lunar lander, and they told me something about the lunar lander, and because Nate knew about that, we bounced off that, and it just got more and more interesting. And then one day I rang him, and he was getting really ill. And I could hear a kind of a change in his voice, and I felt really sad because it was obvious he was ill. And he went, "Why don't you ask me the question?"
No way.
He was the guy who suggested I ask it.
Oh, wow. He kind of knew you were.
Oh, yeah,
in a little bit.
he knew why I was there. Yeah, I'd made no secret that I was writing a book about UFOs.
You know how we're always diving into the edge of science and consciousness on this show? Lately, I've been thinking a lot about aging, not just in terms of years, but in how it actually feels in the body. Slow recovery, lower energy, that middle-aged fog that sneaks up on you. I feel like I can barely go out and drink alcohol anymore. That's why I started using something called Qualia Senolytic. And it's been a major shift for me. Let me explain. As we age, our bodies accumulate what scientists call senescent cells, also known as zombie cells. These are worn out cells that stop dividing but don't die. They hang around in your body, draining your energy, clogging up your recovery, and generally making you feel older than you are. Qualia Senolytic
I better show this because I am using this content, so I better respect this and everything. So let's go.
The first of its kind supplement formulated with 9 plant-based compounds designed to help your body naturally eliminate these zombie cells. It's not something you take every day, just 2 days a month, but it supports your body in aging better at the cellular level. Since I've started taking it, I've felt sharper, lighter, and like my body's resilience has come back online. It's vegan, non-GMO, and grounded in serious research. Experience the science of feeling younger. Go to qualialife.com/Jesse for up to 50% off your purchase and use code Jesse, again, that's JESSE, for an additional 15% off. That's QUALIALIFE.com/Jesse, JESSE, for an extra 15% off your purchase. Thanks so much to Qualia for sponsoring this episode.
Why don't you ask me the question?
Yes.
And I was nervous. I was actually slightly nervous. And
Taking it back.
I've never released it, but I've actually got a recording of this.
Oh, my
moment.
God.
And he had authorized me to record it.
Of course.
And I went, I've been agonizing about how to ask you this question. And he went, third time, why don't you just ask me the question? And so I went, have you ever been read in to any kind of program involving unidentified aerial phenomena, alien
UFOs.
technology? And before I finished answering the question, he went, yes.
Wow.
And he'd obviously made the decision to answer the question. And I actually didn't hear him the first time he said it. I was expecting him to go, no, I don't know, because everybody was saying, no, I don't know anything about what you're talking about. Well, actually, no, that wasn't true. I'd already had people confirm the retrieval program. But there was a kind of a beat, 1, 2, and then I went, what?
Yeah.
And I, out of respect to Nat and his family, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of the remaining parts of the conversation, because what he then did for me was incredible. He facilitated introductions to people, and that was my big breakthrough.
Wow.
And
will that conversation ever come out?
I think I'd want his family's okay about it.
Sure.
Because it's an emotional thing, I think, for a family to hear a father's voice after he's been passed for so long.
Yeah.
I think that's up to him. What would he think?
He was a beautiful guy, and it was an act of courage on his part. And I remember that one of the conversations I had with him was, do you think there's any good reason? Because this is the thing I wrestle with, as I know you do as well.
This is the thing. Some family, at least with some that I had, they're not supportive of me with stuff that I knew about UFOs or my experiences and stuff like that. And after a while, I just got rid of them. And pretty much fuck you, I would do it anyway. I say that'd be between him and the man himself, not the family. Because sometimes the family, it's about how them feel about how they're gonna work. Now it's between him and that man, not the family. But anyways,
what's the dirty secret?
Right.
Why? Why can't we know this? If the US has recovered technology, why can't we know? And he hadn't been told that. And he had that rigid doctrinaire thing about how he wasn't read into that part of it. And that was a compartmentalized issue he wasn't entitled to know about. What he told me was that he'd been told that the United States had recovered multiple craft.
Wow.
Multiple craft. And he implied very strongly that Roswell and another case I'm interested in, Aztec and Kingman, were all real incidents.
right.
And that really rocked my worldview. And but what happened was he also told me that there was another time I asked him, I said, have you ever actually seen evidence of alien technology? And he went, no. And I was kind of disappointed because it implied that he had.
Yeah.
And then he gave me this cheeky look, and because we were talking on Zoom, and I said, have you ever been given anomalous technology that defied prosaic explanation? And he went, like he had the first time, yes.
Wow.
And then he told me this amazing story about how he was an expert in a particular type of welding called electron beam welding.
Okay.
And apparently his company had done the nose wheel for the C-47, one of the big cargo planes used by the US military, and they need really tough welds. And this is one of the strongest welds you can do of metals. And he was like the world expert with his company in that type of welding. And it's an indistinguishable bead, unlike, I don't know if you've ever welded, but welds leave a big bead. This type of welding didn't. Wow. And so he was contacted on his own admission by Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Oh, Wright-Pat.
And I think it was even whatever the technology division is known as now. I think it might be the Foreign Technology Exploitation, something or other.
FTE,
And he was flown to Wright-Pat.
Yeah.
And he did go underground. I remember I giggled and I said, did you go underground? He went, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was obviously a long way down. And he was taken into a room under heavy guard and shown what he described to me as the piece of a bulkhead. And he said it looked like it should have been incredibly heavy, but it was almost lightweight, like a feather.
Yeah.
And he said what blew him away was, and I don't know enough about metallurgy to know this, but he said there were two types of metal, and he wouldn't tell me what types of metal they were, that had been bonded.
That's classified as
and he asked to look at it, I think under an electron scanning microscope. And the scientist in him couldn't resist giving that sense of awe about what he saw, that he said it was bonded at the atomic level.
Whoa.
Whoever had built this had layered it atom by atom, and he said, I know for a fact that's not a technology certainly that I'm aware of, and I would have thought that I would have known.
Yeah, I think like
That makes
semiconductors, you can do little amounts of atomic layer deposition, but you can't fabricate at scale materials that are atomically, you know, where you're deliberately placing atoms. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I think for me, the big aha moment where I stopped being the skeptic and went, holy fuck, this is real. I can't believe this. And I remember I actually spent days just going for walks because I was writing my book, and it had actually altered. I had a confirmational bias.
Yeah.
I was writing a book to debunk all this nonsense, and this guy is telling me it's true.
Is this in plain sight, by the way, that you were writing at the time?
Yeah. And the great thing about it was I was doing a lot of travelling for 60 Minutes and Channel 7, two big networks in Australia, and I was often in America. And as part of cost cutting, they'd often leave you in a hotel for a few days while you shared the crew with another reporter. And so you'd have downtime when really all you wanted to do was be with your family. And you're sitting in a hotel in Washington or New York. And it sounds like fun, I know. And once you've tried on the fluffy dressing gown and used the bath salts once, you're just a bit bored.
Yeah.
And so I would... I'd research things, and I was going to the National Archives and reading a lot of the old archives on UFOs, and then that organised for me to start meeting people, and that was like UAP 101.
UFO.
And there was just this conga line of people coming through an apartment I rented that were brave, amazing people.
It's amazing. Well, it's amazing how deeply embedded you became, because if I remember correctly, Grush had come out, and you guys had some mutual contacts before he came out.
Yeah, that's true.
And with Jake Barber, I believe you knew him for like a couple of years before he came out.
I can't say how long I knew Overman, but basically, it's just to protect them. But basically, I learned about David Grush from people in the program.
I just think that's important for the audience to hear, because you know they think it's some like choreographed thing or whatever.
No, that's like, you know, people have always got this idea that all that happens is these people come to you and you interview them, and it's a really lazy job.
Yeah.
And they have no idea. Honestly, I used to have a full head of hair, and the job of it's a bit like you. I really admire the way you do your stuff, because you actually know a lot of science and a lot of physics. And but you do, and I love the way you demonstrate that knowledge in the shows that you do.
Thank you.
Whereas I honestly am not a scientist, but what I do is I'm really good, and I learned this at law school, at absorbing huge amounts of information, complex information, and analysing it and understanding it and making sure.
Honestly, I don't give a shit about science. I already knew about this stuff. Without science, I mean, to be scientists and a lot of people astrophysics have been my enemies in a lot of ways, because they've been the ones that said this can't be real and bullshit like that. So I don't think they're that smart with the stuff that I already know, me and others, and our experiences and everything. I just don't give that much credence whatsoever.
I understand it, because at law school we had the Socratic method where you were tested orally about your understanding of something, and you were put on the spot by the lecturer and questioned in front of 300 other students. And if you didn't know your stuff, you were humiliated and vilified. And I was never going to let that happen. And I was humiliated and vilified on constant occasions. And
so you're like Pavlovian conditioned. Into being
I
a
was.
great
It's
orator.
terror training. Yeah,
that's right.
And so I learned subjects so that I could hold conversations with people, and I'd read Scientific American articles and try and understand them, and I, for the life of me, couldn't. And I'd get friendly physicists or neuroscientists to explain things to me. And it's by demonstrating a knowledge or an understanding, or just enough to be able to have a conversation with somebody, that increases the flow. And so sometimes I'd come out of a conversation and I'd go, I think I've got what they're talking about. And there's a lot of ideas that people were discussing with me that, frankly, now that I'm into consciousness and psionics and stuff like that, I'm only now beginning to understand. And it's 7 years since I had those conversations. And
it's wild how much your kind of aperture opens up. I mean, I'm curious as to like how you feel now, because you've broken all these stories. You can't really argue with the substance of a lot of the stories. You can't argue with the people's backgrounds, their credentials. Like, you can't really do that. And so I imagine you feel like you're on this, like, remote island. And then, like, you have, I feel this at least, you have, like, mainstream media or news, and they just... it's like they can't even comprehend like where you are.
It's funny. I'm so glad you've led me into this path, because I'm going to give you my rant. I think there will come a time in the not too distant future where there will be a bloody reckoning with the failure of the mainstream media in the main to deal with the greatest disinformation operation in human history.
Yes. Yeah.
It has been the most effective PSYOP ever run.
Yeah. But you also realize when talking to a lot of these people, the PSYOP, maybe it's at the top. Okay, I'll give you a crazy story.
Sure.
A friend of mine was planning an op-ed with a former cabinet member in the U.S. The cabinet member wanted to know where they were expressing frustration about their lack of access to UFO stuff. I decided to help him out because he was having trouble with the Wall Street Journal getting this published, which is just prima facie crazy if you take that claim at face value. Yeah. Even just the fact that the cabinet member is claiming it.
Well, what made the New York Times publish it in 2017? The mere fact that the Pentagon was looking at UFOs was a story.
It's there you go.
Well, doing it forever.
That is a story, right? And so, and then you get into all these questions of like, why did the New York Times reject the Grush story? It's crazy. But in this case, I'm talking to this journalist at the Wall Street Journal trying to help my friend out. And she's actually somewhat open-minded, but like she just, it's one of these things where it's like, it seems so beyond the pale. And if you don't understand the deeper research and you haven't gone down the rabbit hole, it's kind of like in one ear out the other. And she then says, I don't know. We have this like consultant that we talk to about UFOs here, and his name is David Spergel, and you know where I'm going with this. And David Spergel tells me that it's all space trash, temperature inversions, and light reflections. And in my head, I'm thinking that's exactly what Don Menzel would say in the 50s to throw people off the trail. And David Spergel not only did the NASA UAP review panel in 2023, but he happens to run the Simons Foundation, as a scientific advisor, and is very embedded in DOE research. And that's where, if you know what we both know, that's where the bodies are buried.
Absolutely. No, and it's funny. I one of the things in my line of work is we have a vulgar expression, which is always assume a fuck up before a conspiracy. Like, conspiracies happen so rarely, and invariably it's the screw ups that are the explanation rather than active conspiracy. In this case, I have been led reluctantly to the conclusion this is a conspiracy, that there really is a group, a cabal, a leadership cabal that is actively conniving to deceive the public.
Why do you think that, going back to your earlier question of like, what's the big deal? Why do you think they hide it?
I think they've convinced...
Like I keep saying, a lot of it is BS religion, how to destroy religions and stuff like that. Also, they want to control the power that if you go to space, go to different galaxies, planets, different universes, etc. Also, like multi-dimensional travel and stuff like that. They want to control and have this all weaponized psychic abilities, psionic abilities. They want to keep all that power to themselves. They don't want the public to have access to it. And put oil-producing countries out of business, electric companies, gas companies, At the same time, they need to also purify this energy, because a lot of this energy that's being used, whether there's technology, it can kill us as well. So, I mean, there is, flip sides to all this, and it has nothing to do with national security. That's just BS. Other countries have this. They know all about this stuff that we have and everything else. So.
Themselves, because I actually asked somebody from Lockheed Martin this.
Yeah, perfect.
What's up, guys? I want to tell you about my new favorite boots. These things are
The attempt by Bigelow Martin executive that they are holding alien technology. And I just blurted it out. I said, look, can I ask you a question? I said, I promise you I'm not recording you. Why?
Yeah.
Why not just come out and say it? And he said, it's not us.
Yeah.
He said, it's the agency.
Interesting.
He said, we want to do it. And then that's how I found out about the attempt by Bigelow Aerospace.
Right.
Because this bullshit story about metamaterials that, God bless them, Leslie and Ralph put in the New York Times story, that was always nonsense. It wasn't metamaterials. It was a spacecraft.
Right.
Lockheed Martin was going to pass on control of an alien spacecraft to Bigelow Aerospace. That's the real story.
Mm-hmm. And you hear rumors that maybe it was the Kingman craft in Q3.
Oh, yeah.
And so the interesting thing is the CIA intervened to stop that from happening, or at least the Office of Global Access, as it was once known.
And it was Glenn Gaffney, right? It was now.
It's interesting. I'm not 100% sure it was Glenn Gaffney.
Okay.
People have denied that from the inside, but I don't know if that's disinformation.
Okay.
Right.
Glenn Gaffney's
Don't know.
definitely been involved in the cover-up.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
And Australia, I remember when I first met you, it was at the Soul Foundation a couple years
That's right.
ago. And Australia has its own fascinating history that I remember asking you about at the time. You have this guy named Harry Turner.
Oh, I love Harry Turner.
Tell us about Harry Turner.
Well, good friend of mine, Bill Chalker, who's probably Australia's preeminent UAP researcher,
UFO.
he got to know Harry really well while Harry was alive. And Harry had been, in his youth, as a young 20-something, a young physicist recently qualified from Melbourne University, and he expressed an interest in investigating UFOs to the then government. And they'd invited him to come on board back in those more learned and insightful days when governments didn't try and hide evidence of UFOs. They invited this young physicist in to analyse UFO sightings because they were, like the Americans, trying to investigate them. And we were involved in a collaborative relationship with America, providing information to Project Blue Book, handing over some of the more interesting Australian and New Zealand sightings cases. And there was a collaborative exchange of data and information, which there still is secretly, but I won't get to that until later.
Yeah,
but
this happens with all the other countries, including Russia. We exchange stuff. We just do. It doesn't matter if we're so-called enemies. There's a global government when it comes to UFOs, magic, tech, magic stuff, spirit stuff. That is a global entity when it comes to that. Or that.
The interesting thing is Harry Turner somehow fell into the Maralinga nuclear test program, and when the British were developing their nuclear weapon, God bless the British, they let their bombs off in the middle of Australia. And I've been involved in doing stories about what a dreadful scandal that was, and how
the Woomera
Aboriginal people died in their droves from horrible cancers, and so did the servicemen who were involved in supervising the tests. But there's two ranges. There's the Maralinga range, where the bombs were tested, and there's the Woomera range, where they tested the ICBMs. And Woomera is still very active. It's where the Americans have secretly been testing hypersonic missile technology. And there's a huge level of collaboration secretly between Australia and the US, where a lot of your dirty aerospace gets brought out to Australia. And funnily enough, it's neither here nor there. I've had many Aboriginal communities that are often the only communities out there in these remote parts of Australia who've described black triangles flying over their communities, silent black triangles.
Wow.
Something is, I'm sure, being tested in the Australian outback.
Wow.
But Harry, in the whenever the nuclear tests started, I think it was in the 1950s and into the 60s, he was the supervising physicist on the range at Maralinga. And he was invited to investigate multiple UAP sightings that took place at Maralinga during the sightings. And there are still reports in the archives of those UAP sightings, and I put a lot of them in my book. And there's a young fella who I've just put an article of his up on a website in Australia, Rhys Dalton Moore, and he's basically, his grandfather ran the Woomera test range, and it turns out he was secretly involved in investigating Rhys Dalton Morgan, I apologise, and his grandfather was involved in secret investigations with the British government in the late 1940s in Britain into UFOs. And so it turned out there's this whole area of physicists, including Harry Turner, who were witness to UFO incidents in their droves in the Maralinga and Woomera test range areas during the 50s and the 60s. And so after he'd done that work, Harry went on to work in the equivalent of the DIA, the Defence Intelligence Agency in Australia, which at the time was known as the Joint Intelligence Organisation, JIO. And he, in 1972, wrote an extraordinary paper, which lots of people keep on sending me going, wow, you must read this, Ross, you wouldn't know about this. And I've blooming written chapters about it and talked about it for years. I find it fascinating. Harry wrote this definitive piece, which basically was a report to the chief of JIO recommending that the Defence Department of Australia set up a UFO flying squad to investigate UFOs. And it was under serious, active consideration. You can see that they weren't going to dismiss their chief scientist in a hurry. And he made a very authoritative argument that the Americans were essentially lying.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a strong suspicion, because there was an enormous amount of liaison between physicists from America and physicists from Australia, that there was a bit of cross-pollination, that Harry had picked up stuff from American nuclear physicists who were aware of the early stages of the American legacy program.
Well, you told me one time that, like, some of the graybeards you've spoken to in the Australian context talked about Robert Sarbacher coming and visiting them, and obviously
Robert Sarbacher was definitely involved in liaison. And the most interesting thing is a lot of the Australian scientists, including Harry at one stage, went on expeditions to the Pacific tests, because the Americans were trying to suck up to us for exploding bombs in our backyard by inviting us to be part of these tests and to be witnesses to them. And of course they were polluting vast parts of Micronesia, spraying nuclear residue all over huge parts of the Marshall Islands and Johnson Atoll. Huge numbers of communities. I've been out to the Marshall Islands and Johnson Atoll briefly, and it is really quite amazing to think that they were exploding thermonuclear weapons in the open. But I think there was a lot of cross-pollination there as well between Australian scientists and American scientists. And it's pretty obvious. Harry picked up a lot of information, and he wrote this absolutely candid analysis that the Americans clearly have some kind of retrieval program. He talked about Roswell, he talked about other retrievals, and he talked about how the Americans were clearly keeping this from us. And look, even in present day, this is
the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where we know that they were funding Thomas Townsend Brown and all sorts of other, anti-gravity stuff. So it's a fascinating document. Speaking of the Marshall Islands, you, before me, actually broke this amazing story about bluegill triple prime.
Oh, yeah.
With Jeffrey Cruikshank, who is a really amazing researcher and also comes from the nuclear world.
But he also makes me fall asleep.
What got you onto that story? And now, I want to talk about this with you because there's a little bit of controversy around Harold Malmgren.
Well, I know, and I've seen Jeff's also published a rebuttal to Douglas Dean Johnson's hatchet job.
I will link that too.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I haven't had a chance to read his rebuttal yet. I thought Douglas raised some legitimate points.
Totally.
And I'm really interested to see the academic argument back from Jeff. I just haven't had a chance to read it yet. But yeah, I mean, how did I get into that? I was, as a young man, I was living in New Zealand when these tests were happening in some cases. And it was, I can tell you, a big issue that both the Yanks and the French, particularly the French at Mururoa Atoll, were exploding thermonuclear weapons in our backyard. And I can remember, as a much younger journalist, I learned how to use the archives, and one of the early documents I found in the Australian archives was evidence of secret testing of animals for radiation residue from those nuclear experiments that were, at the time, kept from the Australian and New Zealand public. And there were nucleotides showing
US,
quite concerning
Russia,
levels of radioactive isotopes coming from weapons testing, including, by the way, Maralinga and other explosions that had taken place in islands off the coast of Australia, that showed that, contrary to what the public had been told, there were radioactive elements getting into the blood and the bodies of human beings. And more importantly, there was a discernible sigma move, if you like, showing a statistical lift in cancer rates. Mm-hmm. And this was never revealed.
I think got it right there. I love getting enough people and talking stuff like that. I invite people, if they want to learn more about Ross Coulthart and sort of stuff, and nuclear testing, investigative journalism, role of government secrecy, and stuff. Me, I want to get into the real. I'm not going to do that tonight. So stuff tonight. I'm not. Biggest reason is not enough people not chatting. But anyways, I had to do this tonight because of that bullshit that the Enforcer news channel put out on me, calling me a liar, probably a liar about my father, me about UFO stuff, where my father worked and stuff. I'm not gonna allow you son of a bitch talk shit about me, or we get into the ring or whatever, hash it out. Anyways, I just not gonna allow that. People, doing that pisses me off, and everything. Put out misinformation, disinformation. We were talking about Iran. Stuff like that, and it got on UFOs and everything. They say that that's just conspiracy theories. And biggest retards. I can tell only retards don't believe that stuff and everything. So and then and then Enforcer Matt started saying, you didn't have any talks with your father about, F-117, classified stuff. It's like, what the fuck? You don't put out bullshit like that. You don't know what me and my father talked about. Fuck you. A lot of people that worked on secret stuff and worked on secret programs are pissed off at the government, have gotten cancer for the stuff that they've worked on, whether it's ET reverse technology or other hazardous materials, stuff like that. And the stuff doesn't have anything to do with national security. They just want to weaponize this stuff. It isn't for military purposes and everything. So I had to do that. Even like, leave a comment, tell me what you think. I'll do more stuff tomorrow, maybe. So, depending, people say or do. So, peace out, everybody. Take care and have a good morning or night, wherever you are.